Hi, my name is bunnyhoppor, and today I want to give you a secret rogue guide for a deck that I played a few hundred games in top 100 legend over the last month, and I got as high as rank 4 legend. So I'll talk today about this rogue list, and I'll talk a little bit about tech cards in the end. This guide can also be extended to similar decks like World Kick Rogue, because many of the lessons that we have here are quite the same. The playstyles, however, may vary a little bit. Decks with Nitro Boost, Poison, or Eviscerate should be played more proactively, whereas the one that I'm going to talk about today is played a little bit more control-ish. Let me know in the comments if you would like me to talk about the more detailed version on World Kick Rogue, or if I should next do a guide on Priest or something completely different. Today I will focus in the video on this set of core cards. These are not the rogue core cards, but this guide is for this set of core cards, because you can exchange a few cards and I think the guide will still be valid. I've named the set Control because even though this rogue deck does play a lot for board and for tempo, often it does assume the style of and it doesn't really have the style of a control deck. It assumes the role of the control deck in a lot of matchups, but we'll get to that a little bit more in detail later when we look at specific matchup. So let's dive right into our secret rogue guide, and we'll start with the Mulligan like we should do with all our guides. But the problem is I'll have to go through all the relevant matchups by themselves that I have faced on ladder, and I will talk you a little bit through my decision making on what to mulligan. And we're going to do this separately for every matchup, because in order to mulligan correctly you need to understand a lot of things. You basically need to understand the whole game to be able to make the correct mulligan decisions, because you need to know what you mulligan for, what your game plan is. So you need to know, number one, the matchup, is it favored or unfavored? Number two, your game plan, how am I planning to win this game? And number three, what am I trying to achieve in the early game? What are my specific mulligan cards useful for? How do I envision playing these cards in the early game? What will I keep? Let's start out with the cards you always keep in every matchup. And the cards you keep in every matchup are Foxy Fraud, Pharaoh Cat, and Miscreant. Those three always keep. And then if you already have a Foxy Fraud, you can keep Swindle, and you can keep One Thief if you already have Foxy Fraud or you have a coin. The One Thief off coin isn't that easy to activate, so it might sometimes not be great, but combinations of cards like Cat and One Thief, whenever you have combo cards and they can be efficiently activated by other cards, are also nice keeps. Also, of course, Foxy, Shadowstep, Edwin, great combination of cards to play either on turn 1 or 2, making you a huge Edwin is always great. You will not see this combination very often because it's a 3-card combo including a legendary, but whenever you see it you always keep it and you're very happy about it. And of course you have Prep Swindle, which basically just cycles 2 cards from your deck and lets you also activate a 1-drop on 1, so you could like Prep Swindle and you can play One Thief on 1 even though you're going first. Those are always keeps you can think about. A great combination of cards. Alright, let's look at matchups specifically, and first up we have the more aggressive decks such as Aggro Demon Hunter and Zoo. And I will talk a little bit about Aggro Rogue separately because the deck plays out quite differently than these other two. So let's start with Zoo and Aggro Demon Hunter. Both matchups are quite alright, so that's number one. Your goal in the matchup is to fight for board and then leverage your board to push face damage or to run your opponent out of cards and survive their onslaught. For those matchups, you don't want to keep any secrets, as your opponent is likely to play 2 cards on turn 1 and you're not getting any value from either of those secrets. Also, secrets generate more value in your hand, but they don't go for board, and it's important to fight for board against these. To the aforementioned mulligan that you always keep, you want to add now Backstab and Blightplunderer, as they help you control your opponent's board, as well as Shadowstep if you already have a Miscreant, because the lackeys that you create from Miscreant generate a lot of tempo or board presence and allow you to efficiently trade with your opponent's minion and then either evolve or use damage lackey or faceless lackey to develop your own board presence to counter your opponent. You would like to follow this up with Jandas, that you might want to shadow step as well to generate a larger board the turn after, or to combo with Miscreant or other combo cards. But don't be greedy with your resources. It's very important in these two matchups to fight for board early and not hold back your resources for too long, because you're just going to end up dying. Especially against Aggro Demon Hunter, because they have a lot of damage from hand. Zoo doesn't really have that much damage from hand. They will just bully you off board if you let them snowball. Zoo has a lot of cards that snowball as soon as they are on board, like the Prime or the 2/3 that gives you mana every time you tap or damage yourself. So you don't want these on board. Also, you want to develop your own board so you can counter pressure, and against Aggro Demon Hunter it's often essential to generate taunts, while lackeys, Pharaoh Cats are to generate defensive secrets using Shadow Julahana or also One Thief. Most of the games are won by running your opponents out of cards. Exception to the rule, make a big Edwin or questing if you play a list with questing, and hit them in the face. Going all in on questing or Edwin is super effective against all these aggro decks, because most of them have no natural way to deal with it, and your Edwin or questing will just raise them. Against Zoo, additional tips are try to regain board with Jandas. Use your stunner on Expired Merchant, especially when they discard Hand of Gul'dan or Giants. Stunnering the Expired Merchant gets rid of a lot of refill that they could have, so Secret plus Stunner is usually well used on an Expired Merchant, and then even if the play in that turn isn't the most tempo or best, it often helps you to alleviate pressure later on, because if you give them Hand of Gul'dan back or Giants back, they will eventually play them for 0 mana and they will overrun you. You could try to flick Giants if possible. Again, don't be greedy with your flick, but Giants are the best target, as they are your opponent's best way to swing large boards and put huge amounts of damage on the board, so you can't even respond with other randomly generated cards like Rolling Fireball or other removals you might want to try to get into your deck. Also, they're terrible to stunner in the later parts of the game. If they cost 4 or 5 mana, go ahead, stunner them. You're gaining a lot of tempo by doing this. But if they cost like 2-3 mana, they come back down way too cheap and you're not really gaining much other than a turn. The matchup is primarily won by controlling the board and then killing them with your board advantage, and secondarily outlasting them, but that usually only works if they don't hit their Hand of Gul'dan card draw. Like if they hit one, you can maybe outlast them, but you can usually not outlast a whole Zoo deck when they discard it with Expired Mansion and then get again, and they discover maybe 2, sometimes 3 or 4 Hand of Gul'dan. They just have way too much stuff, they make way too big boards. The Giants are too cheap, they run you over. So try to build a board, and then, you know, when they show a turn of weak development, try to value trade and then leverage the rest of your advantage to go face, because they're going to have to damage themselves a lot to be able to play cheap Giants and have large swing turns. Cards like Frost Nova can also be great, because you can play minions Frost Nova and then hit them in the face next turn. Kind of board lock them, make them unable to respond. Alright, and then next up, Aggro Rogue. I said it's a little bit different. Your game plan against Aggro Rogue revolved around trying to kill them as fast as possible, because if you give them enough time, they will kill you. Therefore, try to efficiently remove your opponent's minions while trying to develop your own board as much as possible. And board development here is basically just measured in how much damage do I have on board. How much damage can I do to my opponent's face next turn? Because they will not trade with you. They will not trade with you. The main question is here, how do I set up the maximum amount of damage on my board while reducing the damage I have to take with my face? You don't have to take care about being mana efficient. A lot of times with this deck you want to be mana efficient. Here it's about building a board, efficiently hitting your opponent in the face. They've dictated that the game plan is killing each other, so you're going to have to oblige to that. Also be aware, this is not a good matchup, so you don't want to be taking more risk. Generally, the worse the matchup, the higher the risk you have to take. And that is true for all the matchups we're going to be discussing today. Even Miscreant is great because it lets you generate taunts with a Titanic Lackey, as well as do lots of damage on board with Evolve or Faceless Lackey. Evolving a Miscreant, or especially playing your own Faceless Lackey, puts so much stuff on board that can be really, really nice to be able to counter pressure them. Same goes for Jandas. Jandas on turn 5 is often one of the few options for you to raise your opponent. Can often put 10 damage on board. And since they're completely unwilling to trade because their dagger has like 6 damage or something like that, they really don't want to be hitting your minions. And they don't want to be trading with theirs as well. One Thief is great to find removal or defensive options that you usually don't have access to in your deck, such as Mirror Images, 2 taunts for very cheap mana, Ice Barrier, Frostbolt, Frostbolt being the best option of them all, or good removal such as Arcane Missiles or Explosion. If you get offered none of these premium options, you usually want to go for cards that deal damage themselves, like Fireball, or you can try Power of Creation to discover Taunt, but turn 8 might be just too late. So you want to go for counter pressuring them and doing damage. Also in this matchup, Prize Plunderer is better than Backstab because usually all their minions have 1 HP, so it's very easy to remove something with Plunderer, and you play it, you put 2 damage on board yourself, with which you can counter pressure your opponent. For the Mulligan, we add Backstab, we add Prize Plunderer to those, and we try to raise our opponent. Now let's go a little bit more into the mid-range matchup. First up, we'll have Spell Damage Mage. Here we're slightly unfavored as our deck is very board centric, and because our opponent's deck is very explosive, meaning they have turns in which they will take it slow and turns where they try to overwhelm you. And our deck is better in building up constant pressure and responding to your opponent's turns one by one. So try to pressure your opponent early and set up a largest possible Edwin or questing as soon as possible to make your opponent spend all their resources on it. If they use Firebolt and Frostbolt on it, they don't only take their turns and they take their burns, and the burn is then not used on your face, meaning you won't die as fast. When they have spell power active, especially when you know it's coming with Awakening Imprisoned Phoenix, try to play around Arcane Explosion board wipes. Generally, the more condensed your stats are into one card rather than spread out through the board, the better it is for you, because they're going to have to use burn spells rather than Arcane Explosion, which is something, of course, only goes on board. Try to develop minions into the turns before they pop off, especially telling when they want to pop off is when they play Imprisoned Phoenix or when they play the quest. You know they're going to take certain turns off and not attack, not do face damage, but just trying to generate cards in their hand and stuff like that. And then in the turns where they pop off, like the Phoenix wakes up or they already have generated a bunch of cards and have a lot of mana to spend, you want to play secrets. Against the Phoenix board, oftentimes the Dirty Tricks is better because it just lets you just draw some cards and don't really want to develop into their Arcane Explosion anyway. Against other turns with Sorcerer Apprentice, of course, Plagiarize is insane because you can, if you plagiarize a strong turn with Sorcerer's Apprentice, you can counter pressure them quite nicely. So you try to capitalize of their strong plays for you and counter pressure them. You don't want to be developing too many minions into Arcane Explosion anyway, unless it's a really big one. If you can develop one really big one, like a big Reborn minion or something like that, on turn 7 or a Cartude, you're fine with that, because you want your minions to take the damage, not your face, because they will kill you with fireballs to their face. If they will start fireballing your minions, you might be able to generate ways to get out of this. You mostly win this matchup by killing them with a big minion or running them out of resources. You want your minions to take damage from the missiles, not your face. Randomly created secrets from Hanar are very, very effective. Stuff like Omayog or Never Surrender Paladin premium secrets. However, they're kind of hard to create, and other than the Paladin secrets, everything's a bit dicey. Pressure Plate is another really good one that you might want to be using. Sadly, there are almost no good stunner targets in your opponent's deck, which is one of the things that makes it a lot harder. Best one is even Confetti Cyclone, and that's a 2-drop, but it does give you some tempo and it clogs up your opponent's hand with a bunch of useless stuff, so they might sometimes have hand space issue. Mulligan is the same as always. You add Backstab and Dirty Tricks when you're on the play, so your opponent has the coin. Next up, we'll have Token Druid. The way we win this matchup is by A, removing their board, or B, making a big questing or admin, or both. Method A is usually achieved by trying to be ahead on your board for the first wave of minions they create with miscreants, cats, reborn minions, lackeys, and removing everything one by one with backstab, plunderer, and the minions you already have on board. While the second wave can be cleared with either flick or created spells from one chief, such as exploding firebolt, evolving missiles, flame strike, or combustion. Those are the most premium options you can get for this. Method B is kind of self-explanatory. You guys all know how to make a big admin and hit your opponent in the face. I think we got that covered. So Mulligan, same as always. Add backstab, add dirty tricks, on coin or not. On coin also flick, as well as any combination that allows you to make a big questing or admin early, always keeps in this matchup. Why you want to be keeping flick on coin but not on the play is firstly because on the play you're limiting your options, you have a card less in hand of course, and secondly one of the biggest things that these decks do is they play Glowfly Swarm on turn 5, and flick can be coined when you're on the coin into a Glowfly Swarm and you can kill it. Whereas when you're on the play you don't have that option. An example for a big hand that is very good to is a questing Shadow Step, one thief on coin will make a very sizable questing that can then kill your opponent. For the game plan, this deck often turns your opponent's deck often takes the first turns off or makes board of Gibberlings that can be handled with backstab, daggers, and other small minions. So try to develop early minions that can be used for trading later. They probably need to draw cards around turn 2 or 3. So when they draw cards, you want to be developing dirty tricks so they can draw you cards as well. Whereas you don't want to play Plagiarize into those turns. You want to play Plagiarize as your other secret into their turn 4. So you could copy, especially when they're on coin, you could copy like coin Glowfly Swarm. It gives you the coin back, and having the extra coin is super important because it makes your combo cards so much more effective. And also if you have flick in hand already and they go coin Glowfly Swarm and you plagiarize it, you can go coin your own flick back, and flick is super important because it gets rid of all of their boards, and they usually have to they only have a few ways to generate boards, so you need to generate with these few ways very efficiently. Also, tips for this matchup are, another tip for this matchup is Shadow Step your flick. It makes it really awkward for them to redevelop into your board. And yeah. If you don't have a good turn, and this is kind of true also for the matchups that I've already talked to, the other aggro matchups, don't be afraid of Secret Passage on like turn 4. Or Passage on turn 3 if you don't have anything to do. It's true against all mid-range and aggro decks. Using Passage for 1 or 2 cards might not be what you envisioned, but it's better than dying with a card in your hand. And usually the later turns, on turn 5 you want to be playing stuff like Jandis, on turn 6 you want to be flicking or developing larger boards. So if you don't have anything good to do, it's totally fine to play a Passage and use those cards in your hand. Against non-token druids, that I'll also, of course, is it try to plagiarize cards like Overgrowth. You need to ramp as well. If they ramp and you don't ramp, the game gets pretty hard. If you ramped as well, you can use your Hana very effectively. You can use your questing, your admin very effectively. Or just go for big questing as well as big swing turns against, for example, Highlander Druid, where you want to be going with Hanar, Secret, and Stunner. Next up, we have Enraged Warrior. Okay matchup. Try not to get bullied off board too early. Don't be afraid to use Stunner on Warmaul Challenger or Sword Eater, as well as Bloodbite Brood. Your goal is to run your opponent out of cards. We're the control deck, once again. Mulligan, no backstab, because it's hard to connect. As always, same 3 cards, plus dirty tricks on the play. On coin, Jandis, and Shadow Step. A little bit more on the matchup. The whole matchup is basically you trying to figure out when your opponent will have a skipper turn, because it lets you develop, draw cards, clear your board all at the same time. Don't be afraid to make a board that is weak to skipper plus 1 or 2 more cards until turn 5-6, because then they can likely only clear or develop or draw cards and not all of the above. If they can't do all of the above with a skipper, you're happy. You have to be dealing with their skippers. Then from turn 6-7 onwards, force them to play skipper turns where they don't clear much, because they need to play them anyway. They need to do it to activate their Blood Bowl Brutes. They need to do it to activate their Bomb Wranglers. A few more large minions are better than very many small minions. The worst of those being your own 2 HP minions. They get damage from the first skipper proc and reduce the Blood Bowl Brute in your opponent's hand, and can be beneficial to trade away. So it can be beneficial to trade away your 1/2s over your 1/1s, because 2 HP minions are really, really bad for you. Their goal is to kill you with a combination of Corcoran Elite, Enraged, Shield of Honor, and copying with Bloodthorn Mercenary. So try to put a big taunt in the way sometime in the late game and make your opponent commit Lord Barrow to clear it. As soon as you see your opponent play Barrow, try to make the largest minion with taunt you possibly can. Also, Vaporize and Iceberry are good secrets from One Thief, as well as Freezing Trap can sometimes be very, very good from Hanar and other defensive secrets that would kill your opponent's Corcoran Elite. Try to flick Blood Bowl Brute, Bomb Wrangler, or Skipper. If you can cleanly flick a Skipper, always do it. For example, if you can remove a Brute and flick a Skipper, or flick a Brute and clean the Skipper, you know, like with other cards in your hand, like Prize Bundle, for example, always flick the Skipper. Their entire deck hinges on that card. Try to manipulate that. Next up, Broom Paladin. Okay, matchup. They have too much removal and heal for you to effectively kill them. So this time we're control deck once again, like always. You want to try to stun our minions with Libram of Wisdom on them, because they play it again and again, and it activates their Penflingers and makes them able to trade very effectively with you, as well as do a lot of damage into your face. Or use them on Libram of Hope, or use Flick for tempo. Especially good targets for Flick are Alder Truthseeker and Devout Pupil. Great discoveries from One Thief are Devolving Missiles, Polymorph, and Ice Barrier. Ram Paladin, it's kind of a bad matchup. You just concede to turn 4 or Lura into Tip the Scales. You just go, concede, play a new game, move on. Don't upset too much about it. It's what that deck does sometimes. You try to discover Flamestrike and other late game options to deal with the board of Clowns or Murlocs, as well as expensive removals with your Mage Discover cards. Make a Christmas tree with an R and stunner their 10 drops. Try to go for big questing or Edwin early before they ramp, as they only have one answer, Barov, and even that won't remove a questing if they don't also have a broomstick with it. And then now we go on to control decks. Next where we mainly only have Priest. The mulligan remains the same, but add Backstab. Add Backstab against Priest. Sorry. As you must have an answer for any of the early minions, you can do chip damage. Also add Dirty Tricks. In any case, they will play spells and you will have to draw to keep up. Both of these decks need to be out-resourced. So it's a battle between both our decks. Janus is a very solid keep. Try to Shadow Step cards such as Miscreant, Janus, or Keyword and Ivory. But be aware, Keyword and Ivory spell burst does not trigger when you Shadow Step itself. Try to generate maximum researches, such as Raise That or Potion from Keywarden or other spell discovers, while putting on constant pressure throughout the game and playing around the removal as best way possible. Don't worry too much, your deck has enough ways to answer their proactive plays or minions, so you don't need to be too worried about their development. Your opponent has a limited number of removals and you try to space out your threats. That's what I meant with playing around removal. You want to commit one AoE and another AoE and another AoE. Most popular is Highlander Priest, I think, and Highlander Priest only has around 4 to 5 removals. You also want to do a lot of tip jammers, because Priest, even though it's Priest, is not very good at healing. The only thing they have that makes them very good at healing is Wild Pyromancer plus Apotheosis, which is a combination of cards, which I think in a 2-of deck we just don't play around most of the time. For example, try to go white and have one big minion. I know that's bad to Hysteria, but Hysteria is a little bit asymmetric to the other board clears that they have. Another example is Shadow Step Janus and hold it in hand rather than playing it again. One other tip that is not quite obvious is Morzant is a good answer to your Hanar turn. So if you can pick Repentance while you're doing your Hanar turns, copying it becomes much worse for your opponent because you get to clear their Morzant in much easier way. Because stunnering Murazan back to hand is also not super nice, because Murazan can be super painful on other explosive turns that you want to have. Another great secret to get is Omayog. Omayog can play around a lot of things. Mulligan, dirty tricks, same as always. Backstab, but only keep one backstab. Never keep two backstabs, and Jandas. For the remaining decks, I will only shortly give my thoughts. If there are any questions I have not answered, any decks that I haven't touched, ask me in the comments below, like below the video. And even better option for you and for me is if you come by my stream. I stream at Twitch TV bunnyhoppor. The link will also be in the description. Every weekday from 10 to 6 p.m. CET. And ask me all your questions in the chat. It's the best option for you to get a proper answer rather than just a short wording in the comments maybe. And I'll be able to give my thoughts more precisely. Alright, last few matchups. OTK Demon Hunter, bad matchup. OTK decks are not good for us. We don't have enough effective pressure. Take Risk. Way to win a big questing and Edwins early on. You can also try to flick them walks, that usually runs them out of damage and they can't kill you anymore. Try to play Genders and other large developments into their turn 6 or 5 if they have a reduced skull. You don't want them to skull. You want them to be busy with doing other things and not sculling, because as soon as they skull, they will kill you. Hanar secrets are sadly not very effective against OTK Demon Hunter. So if you go Hanar secret, more development, it's not super worth it. They're not super good against them. Mozaki OTK is another not so great matchup. Big minions don't work against them because they have freeze effects as well. Pressure as much as possible from turn 1. Try to get snipe or pressure plate from Hanar. This usually wins the matchup. Yeah, pressure plate and snipe, because it disrupts their auctioneer, and as soon as you disrupt their huge draw turns, they can't pull off their combo anymore. So that's the most efficient way of trying to win that matchup. Last but not least, I want to talk a little bit about tech cards. I think if you face too much Bomb Warrior, Aggro Rogue, and Paladin, Ooh is a great addition, because your deck doesn't really handle damage from spells or from weapons very well. It handles board very well. We have Stunner, we have Backstab, we have Price Bundler, with all these things that go on board that help us contest the board. But we can't really do anything against weapons if we don't add Ooze. So Ooze can be a great tech card depending on what matchup you face. And if you face a lot of Ram Paladin, for example, Ooze is pretty useless. You don't want it in your deck. You want another questing or Evelyn. If you face a lot of Ram Paladin or Mage or Druid, you want to add another questing and maybe cut a Price Plunderer. Again, check out the stream if you have any questions or you want to see the deck in action. Usually the best explanation is if you see me play and I'll give my thoughts on it. I try to explain all my plays. And the link will be in the description. Leave a comment or like if you want to see more of these videos. And just come to the stream, let me know what you want to know more about this deck or if you have any questions or anything. Thank you very much. That's me out. You guys have a great day. Bye bye.